They're doing 3. Welcome to the August 22nd School Board meeting. The meeting is now in session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and while you do so, I'd like to invite Mario and Anna to join us up front to lead us in the pledge. Oh, this is so exciting. Thank you, Mario and Anna, for leading us in the pledge today. Okay.
Ready? Okay. There you go.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Thank you very much. You're so sweet. Tonight is Dr. Murphy's final meeting as the superintendent of Arlington Public Schools. And we want to take this opportunity to thank him for his service and commitment to APS since 2009. We will also be hosting a community-wide celebration for him on October 26th from 4 to 6 p.m., and we will share details as the event approaches. But tonight, we'd like to take a moment to give a small recognition, take a small moment to give a big recognition. If you were bilingual, you would know that your brain switches and it's reversed in Spanish. That's okay. That'll happen often in my tenure as chair, and I apologize ahead of time. Take a small moment to make a big recognition for Dr. Murphy and his service here. And first, I would like to introduce Debbie Kirkpatrick, the Northern Virginia District Director of the Virginia PTA. And she'll be joined by CCPTA Vice President Catherine Novello, and is the committee chair, Mahinder Dudani here, who will also present Dr. Murphy with the recognition on behalf of the parents in our community. Thank you for being here.
Ooh, it's hard to reach here. So, Dr. Murphy, the Northern Virginia District PTA, I'm Debbie Kilpatrick, of course. We've known each other for more than 10 years in different capacities, but mostly through your role as superintendent. And so our district wanted to recognize you and your years of service with a presentation. And I'm joined here with our Arlington County Council PTA leaders. And so we have a certificate, a joint certificate, as well as individual cards that we'd like to present to you. Would you guys mind coming down? And Tanya, as chair, would you like to join us? I'm going to turn the mic over to the council. To Catherine.
Wanted to briefly say on behalf of the County Council of PTA, thank you for your many years of service to our children and our schools. Thank you for all the support you've given CCPTA over these many years. We wish you all the best in your next endeavor. Thank you.
So this is a card, and my assistant here. Can we move over away from the podium real quick so we can get some good snapshots? There we go. So, on behalf of Northern Virginia District PTA, we represent 225 PTAs and 50,000 members. And on behalf of Arlington County Council PTAs, which represent all of your schools here in Arlington County, in honor of your dedication, leadership, and support of our students, staff, and our schools, we want to award you 2019 Award of Distinction. So thank you for all your Somebody's going to take a quick picture.
Did we want to have the
And you
rest of
guys,
the board
yes,
come down?
I know Nancy can't move, but anyone who'd like to come down, yes, absolutely. I know, Nancy.
Sorry, it's okay. I'm Mahinder. No, I can't.
Maybe we can Photoshop. That's okay.
Yeah, Photoshop.
Leave a gap.
I'll photobomb.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you again. Thanks for coming.
This is yours.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And I do want to take a moment to recognize our county manager, Mark Schwartz. I'm sorry I hadn't seen you earlier. Thank you for being here this evening. We really appreciate it.
He's gonna make a speech.
You want to ask him? I'm not. Would you like to say something, Mark? Thank you. Okay. Thank you for being here. So we would now like to also have present Dr. Murphy a small gift from the board and a proclamation. So I'm going to go to the podium and share that with you, Dr. Murphy, on behalf of the board. So bear with me as I move. I'm coming to the podium because the proclamation is quite big, and it's probably half my size, and it would have been very difficult doing that from the dais. So, Dr. Murphy, we have a proclamation for you. This is the Arlington School Board proclamation. During Dr. Murphy's tenure, he has guided the Arlington Public Schools through unprecedented growth and change. The school board profoundly thanks him for his leadership and unwavering commitment to our students and their success. Whereas, Dr. Patrick Murphy has served with distinction from July 2009 through August 2019 as superintendent of Arlington Public Schools, the 13th largest among Virginia's 132 public school divisions. And whereas, Dr. Murphy has provided excellent leadership, maintaining and enriching a world-class school division with an excellent academic program. And whereas Dr. Murphy has made significant contributions to the school division to continuously improve its programs and services and to advance student success by notably increasing the high school graduation rate by 10 percentage points and earning full accreditation for all APS schools by the Virginia Department of Education for 5 consecutive years. And whereas Dr. Murphy has worked tirelessly to promote the well-being of students, creating an environment that fosters the growth of the whole child and ensures access to meaningful and challenging learning opportunities for all students. And whereas Dr. Murphy successfully led APS to complete multiple capital initiatives with the opening and expansion of new schools and programs and secured an overwhelming support of bond initiatives by Arlington residents, thereby building strong connections throughout the community. And whereas Dr. Murphy has championed many division-wide achievements, including selection of APS for the prestigious Medallion of Excellence Award presented by the U.S. Senate Productivity and Quality Awards for Virginia and the District of Columbia. Therefore, be it known that the Arlington School Board does hereby praise Dr. Murphy for his outstanding contributions to APS and to the students, families, and constituents of Arlington County, and expresses its deepest gratitude for his dedication and commitment to public education. Issued by the Arlington School Board this 22nd day of August 2019. So, this is for you. We are also presenting him, so that he doesn't forget us, with a small but beautiful glass plaque that he can put on his new desk to remind him about APS and our wonderful system and all the great work you did here. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'm now going to go back to the podium, and we're going to share school board remarks. And and then we'd like you to say some words at the end. Okay? Thank you. Board members, I'd like to provide you the opportunity to make remarks about our retiring superintendent. Ms. Van Dorn, would you like to start us off this evening? Thank you.
I just sincerely want to thank Dr. Murphy. I remember the year
you came to Arlington. I remember my first opportunity to meet you. I don't know if you remember this. It was at Jefferson Middle School. I was the PTA president, and we were having our annual international night. And you came and walked around, and I think I said something to you like, "Are you really ready for this?" And you went, "Sure." So you were very enthusiastic, and it was a good transition between you and the previous superintendent. And I'll also not forget that when I was up in Connecticut, where I go in the summers, you called and said, "So tell me about some of the issues with special education." And I was very impressed by the fact that you really did want to know, and you then immediately met with and talked with people in that community who had felt unheard. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for the work you've done, and it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, and best wishes.
Dr. Kennan?
Thank you. Dr. Murphy, I have truly enjoyed working with you. You are dedicated, committed, always on, every single day. You have taken a successful school system and you have continued and grown that success over 10 years. You and I share love of the Washington Nationals, and I do not want to jinx the rest of their season by what I will miss discussing with you as we go into the fall. But I did try to think about which Washington National I could sort of compare you to. And you won't be surprised. You might not be able to think of it right off the top of your head, but it'll be obvious. Ryan Zimmerman, who is still within Washington Nationals, spent his career there, but brings that stability, that commitment, that hard work every single day. Again, that creates a strong team and a strong system. What we have now today is that strong team that you have built and that you have been here for, and it's what gives us the sense we know we will continue to be a strong and successful school system. I want to thank you very much, and go Nationals.
Mr. Goldstein.
Yes, thank you. So I also want to offer my thanks to Dr. Murphy for his 10 outstanding years of service to Arlington Public Schools and all of the great things that APS has achieved during that time under his leadership. And, I tried to write this out as I was developing my remarks, and I wrote a bunch of stuff and then realized, I'd forgotten something, so I discarded that, and I wrote some more. I forgot this, and I realized after a while that I couldn't really list all of the things that APS does so successfully as a result of Dr. Murphy's leadership. So I kind of changed tacks in this, in my remarks here. So maybe the most significant thing is that we have added nearly 10,000 students to the enrollment in the last 10 years. And all the while we're doing that, we are keeping the level of instruction high. Not just the level of instruction, but instruction's a significant piece of what attracts people to Arlington Public Schools. So much so that we're accredited for the 5th consecutive year, and some of those sites that rank schools have called us the best school division in the Commonwealth of Virginia for, I think, second year in a row. So we had a discussion several years ago, and Dr. Murphy said something that stuck with me, and he said it off the cuff, in a very low-key way, that our success is a function of our low class size, high-quality staff, and also the student supports that we put into place. And those supports are things like math coaches and psychologists and the ATSS program, and it just goes on. And we've got a lot of them. And that last piece about the student supports, stuck with me. And as I've thought about it and looked at the effect that it has over time, it's really grown in my mind that it and the other two things that I mentioned, the class size and the high-quality staff, really are the main things responsible for our success, and they're there because of Dr. Murphy. The student supports that we have put in place enables us to broaden the number of students who achieve successful outcomes, who otherwise would not be able to do it without the math coach or the psychologist or the counselor or something like that. The more I think about this, the more I realize how powerful it is in creating a school system as enviable and successful as the one that we have. And so I want to honor Dr. Murphy's role in doing that and provide my profound thanks and say in closing, Pat, best of luck in your future adventures, although I know you're not going to need it.
Ms. O'Grady.
Thank you, Chair Talento. Dr. Murphy, I want to thank you for your dedication to this system. I, like Ms. Van Dorn, remember the first time I met you, and I'm sorry. That's the laugh I've come to enjoy. It was, I think, an opportunity for the superintendent to meet new members of the community, and I came in hard on the issues that I really cared about. And I think you handled that with grace and ease, and I think you've never forgotten it. I just want to thank you for sharing the last 10 years of your life with our system. I think when you look back on your life and the things that you want to, the accomplishments and the dedication and the time and the effort that you want to put into something, I can say how grateful we are that you put the time and effort into APS. And I think you've done it full force. You've helped our system grow in a way that we haven't lost quality. You did so by sharing your personal love of bees with our students and connecting with them. You've helped our system grow in ways that we were able to champion our diverse staff, and I've seen so many leaders that represent our diversity under your leadership. I think the thing I want to thank you most for is as you're leaving our system, you're leaving it in the shape of an excellent school system that someone would be happy to follow in your footsteps for. I thank you for your dedication, and I wish you the best of luck and success in the future.
Dr. Murphy, thank you for your service. Change makers are all very different. And change makers are noted because people see change. But I think some of the most effective change makers are those who affect change steadily and slowly and permanently. And I believe that is the kind of change maker that you are. And when you are a change maker that is steady and focused, and the change comes about slow, it's not always recognized. The influence and the structures and the permanency of positive change that comes from that. And I want you to know that I have recognized it. And in all of my advocacy, in my life, striving to bring the voices of communities and people who are not always at the table or are underrepresented, I have never had to argue with you about why those voices matter, not once. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am that every time we discussed the people in our system, the families, the students, the staff, that you were always seeking excellence for everyone and ready to listen about the voices that maybe were not be at the table. And that is what a change maker does. It sees everything. And you can't change things overnight, not if they're going to be permanent. And you were not looking for a quick change. You were looking for permanent success. And you have put us on a path that has allowed for that type of success to happen and for that type of change to continue to occur. And you have opened doors for our community and our students and our staff to grow and to change and to become change makers in their own right. And that is a person who is dedicated to all students and to public education. And I am grateful for your leadership, and I'm going to miss it. I wish you had waited a year until at least my chairmanship was over. But that's okay. I forgive you for that. And I look forward to the change that you're going to make in your next adventure, and thank you for your service. And so now, if everyone would join me in a round of applause for Dr. Murphy, and then we'll take a picture. So, board members, and I know Ms. Van Doren, you may not be able to join us, but if we could go to the front for a picture, that would be great. One last picture with Dr. Murphy. Oh, that's an excellent idea. This is why you do what you do. Thank you. We should probably bring the proclamation, please, and you can hold that. No, this is great. We'll have the dais. It'll be a picture he can put on his desk about what the dais looked like in Arlington.
We smush together, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe do you want to have some of the stand behind? Do you want to have some of the stand behind? And then that way we get 3 and then 3. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah, you want me to stand?
Yeah,
behind
do you
you?
want us to 3 of us stand? Okay. That's right.
To Dr. Murphy, I was going to provide you the opportunity for some comments, and I appreciate that you're working your way to the podium. So,
That's very humbling, many of the comments that all of you made. I do want to recognize a few people in the room and sort of echo many of the things that you folks have said. And I'm very appreciative also that Mark Schwartz is here this evening, the county manager, because I think what he represents this evening is he represents our county in the sense of what the community believes and what the community believes also about public education and how we have a governance body that also believes firmly in public education. And I think over my tenure here, that has been very evident with our ability to have the things in place with the quality teachers and the low class size and the resources, but coupled with that, with the growth that we are experiencing, the support of the community with our capital projects and the support of the community with our county board. So Mark, please pass along to the county board my appreciation of that support over the 10 years. Some of those members actually were members here on this board, and I know they're very supportive of that. And I also think that's a unique characteristic about this community. The support we have for public education is tremendous. We don't see that across our nation. I feel very fortunate to have worked in a community that is like Arlington, and there are places in this country and in this world that don't have the same support systems and the same beliefs. And I think what that belief system echoes is that everyone can achieve and that everyone can be successful and the American dream can come true for everyone. And I firmly believe that, and I know that that can happen. But it cannot happen just by accident or by someone wishing it. You've got to have the resources and the support mechanisms in place for that to occur. I also want to thank members of the ELT my executive leadership team. There have been transitions over the year. We've had great people step in, but I think that speaks to the consistency and the stability that we have in place and that will continue. It's not about one person or one thing. It's really about having those systems in place. And you'll see this evening also with many of the folks that are here in the audience, whether they're in positions of leadership or they're going to step into positions of leadership this evening, they as well have been a very important component and will continue to be an important component as we kind of move forward. So I feel blessed. I feel fortunate. The past 10 years have been very exciting. I will have very, very fond memories of that. I shared that with our administrative conference group about memories and how important they are. I know Cynthia Johnson will continue to kind of carry us forward as we transition, and I think that that's very important, and her leadership will be excellent. She's the right person at the right time for what the school division needs. And I also want to thank the board. I think you folks are often put in a very unenviable position. Your hearts are in the right place. Your belief systems as well. We have a demanding community at times, but they're very passionate, and that is also a strength of ours. So I think that the combination of all these things have allowed us to be able to move forward and allowed us to be where we are today, and also prepared to kind of make the next steps. Tanya, I hope you will take this in good spirit, my next comment here, but your opening reminded me of my father's experience as a young man at weddings. And he would often say, as the best man, as a toast, that he wished the bride and groom that their joys would be as deep as the ocean and their troubles as light as the foam. However, at one of the celebrations, he inadvertently reversed the saying. And so I wish Arlington the joys as deep as the ocean and as light as the foam as you folks move forward. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy, and thank you all for being here for this part of our board meeting. We are now at announcements. On Monday, August 26th, the board will hold a committee of the whole and closed meeting beginning at 5 p.m. in the school board conference room. And on Tuesday, August 27th, we will hold a closed meeting at 6 p.m., followed by a planning work session at 7 here in the boardroom. Board members, do you have any announcements? Okay, Dr. Murphy, do you have any announcements or updates for us today?
Yes, I actually do, as we're kind of on the threshold here of the start of school and transitioning out of sort of many of the summer activities. And I'm going to start with something that I know we are sharing and very, very proud of. I want to congratulate all of our schools and our leaders in those schools and our teachers. We have earned full accreditation for the 5th year in a row, and we had staff do a little bit of research on this, and we are the only school division in the Commonwealth to earn accreditation for all of our schools 5 years consecutively. So again, that I think speaks to the strength in the system. This is really possible because of the hard work and the teamwork and the dedication of our principals, teachers, and staff and families across the school division. The Virginia Department of Education, which you'll hear a little bit more about this evening from Sarah Putnam, updates the standards of accreditation to emphasize continuous improvement. The standards are focused on progress toward proficiency, narrowing achievement gaps, and reducing absenteeism and dropout. The official results, these are preliminary, will be coming out later in September. And I just want to once again thank our parents and our teachers and our principals and our families who have worked together to ensure our students' success. We also are proud that we learned again this year that the niche organization has named Arlington Public Schools as the top-ranked school division in Virginia.
The 2020 Best School District ranking is based on a rigorous analysis of key statistical and millions of reviews from students, parents, and using data from the U.S. Department of Education. Some of the ranking factors include state test scores, college readiness, graduation rates, SAT and ACT scores, teacher quality, public school district rating, and more. This is one of many recognitions and rankings we use to measure how we're doing system-wide, and the direct results are combined talent and efforts of our schools, our community, our school board, and our community governance system. So congratulations again to school and staff and the community for earning this recognition again this year here in Virginia. I also want to recognize our Arlington County Police Department and Arlington neighbors for the support as we start the beginning of the school year. This is part of Fill the Cruiser Back to School supplies, and our Arlington County Police Department worked to help our students start the school year prepared by collecting new backpacks, school supplies, and other classroom materials. This year, they all donated supplies came from areas of our county such as the Pentagon, City, Ballston, and other locations, and they're going to be distributing these out to families and to schools, and we just want to thank the community again for their generous support and also many of the businesses. Now, if you would like to contribute or be a part of that, you can contact Dawn Smith in our School and Community Relations Department, and she has worked with sharing many of these donations out with our schools and our families, and she's a good contact if you'd also like to contribute or reap some of the benefits of these supplies. We also want to welcome back our APS teachers. Today was the first official day back for all teachers, and Ms. Johnson and I had the opportunity to go out and visit schools and welcome them back. But we also started earlier in this week with our annual Festival of the Minds event, which invited all teachers and staff to come in early before they are officially assigned to come back, and they participated in 3 days of professional learning and events that really prepared them for the first day of work. We also had our new teacher orientation that was on Monday, and Ms. O'Grady and I, as well as Ms. Johnson and Ms. Wales, were also out in attendance in that event and welcoming those folks back to our schools. I want to talk a little bit about how we've transitioned, I think, in the period of time that I've been here in messaging to our families about safety. And when we talk about safety, I'm talking about it in a very broad sense for all of our families. And I think we've also conveyed to all members of our community that school is a safe place. And I know our principals have done that messaging most recently last year in conveying that if there are emergency situations, if there are things that are unusual, if events occur and they can't go home or no one's at home, they can come back to school. Now, I got a little bit of pushback about this, but I think this kind of embraces what we believe. School usually goes on from 9 to 3 o'clock or there approximately. But there's always people at school, even late at night. There are custodians there. There are food service people there early in the morning. They all care about kids. And so school is a safe harbor, and I want that message to get out. Our principals are going to be conveying that. I know Ms. Johnson and I have talked about that. And as parents begin to prepare for the start of school, I want them to think about, as they develop emergency plans or plans in the event of an emergency, that they think about how schools can be an important component of that. Because I think we recognize today we need to be there, we need to be available, and we need to embrace that. So you'll hear a lot of messaging about that in the next several weeks as we move forward into the start of school year. I know Ms. Johnson and I have talked extensively about this, and she will be picking up the same message. And I know our schools are also going to be sending that same message. So as we talk a little bit more about this and get prepared, I want families to begin to think about that and how they are going to address that with their children in the event that something occurs. We've got our bus and transportation services ramped up. As you know, there are some changes that are occurring this year as far as how bus service is going to be occurring. But we've got letters that have gone out. We've also equipped our principals with enough information. We're opening the call center Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We will also have it opened on Labor Day from 1 to 5. So if you've got questions, letters actually went out earlier this week, so and that's to all students who are bus riders. So you may have even gotten your letter today. If it hasn't arrived, it should be arriving by the end of the week. And Mr. Chadwick, is there anything I've either forgotten or you want to highlight?
I just want to highlight that actually the letters will be mailed tomorrow.
Okay.
They did not go out today, and we decided that Sunday afternoon rather than Labor Day would be the better time to be able to get our staff there and to be more convenient for families. So the call center will be open from 1 to 5 on Sunday afternoon, September the 1st.
Okay. And we'll also see buses. I know next week is practice week, so you will see buses kind of traversing the county roads, practicing.
Yes, there's a lot of required training that our bus drivers have to do, so they have a full week of in-service training, and that includes driving the routes, and particularly this year when there are new schools and new conditions around schools.
Very good. Just a couple of reminders as far as upcoming dates. I pointed out today was the first day that teachers returned to school. We've got pre-service activities kicking off. We've got a number of open houses that we have for our schools occurring on the 28th and 29th. Students return on September the 3rd. And then you see the series of back-to-school evenings that we have hosting for families, and more information of that will be coming out here shortly. We also have a celebration of a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the Montessori Public School of Arlington. That's going to be next Thursday at 8 a.m., so I know many of the board members will be out for that. We will also probably have some of our county officials as well as folks from the media, so we're looking forward to that kickoff. Mr. Chadwick, I'm going to turn to you, get a little bit of an update on where we are with some of our capital projects, and you may want to highlight the Montessori School of Arlington in there as well.
Yes, the Montessori School of Arlington, as you know, had a refresh under the Capital Improvement Plan, which is now finished, as did the Drew School. And I encourage you to go and have a look because they seem to be brighter with new LED lighting and new paint schemes. Dorothy Ham Middle School, the teachers, we're in a position where the teachers will be able to go in on Monday. The office is already in there, and we're very excited to finally be seeing steel rising on the addition, and the steel is just about finished for Dorothy Ham, and the interior renovation is finished. It will be, as I said, open to teachers on Monday. There's an army of people cleaning up the school after all the construction over the weekend, and it's going to look real good for the teachers when they come on Monday. At Alice Westfleet, teachers are already in there, and the staff is already in the office, and it will be ready for school on the 3rd. The parking garage is in use. There is a little bit of site work that's still being done, but all of the approvals are in place. At the Heights building, again, staff and teachers are already in the school. Lots of work going on there to complete various details and to clean the building up after construction, ready to greet students on September the 3rd. To find monthly project updates on our schools, which now you can go and see the real thing, please go to the website, and the directions are there for how to get to them.
And we'll continue to refresh even though school has opened with where we are with some of the projects.
Yes, and there are upcoming events where the schools will be, all 3 of the schools will be open to the community.
Very good. Just want to bring to everyone's attention as we start the school year, we are going to be
provided with a tuning or an updating of the strategic planning performance objectives. That's going to be occurring a little bit later this fall. And there are three essential areas that we are actually talking with schools right now about that look at student growth and well-being. The first being increasing achievement for all reporting groups on state assessments and eliminating opportunity gaps being number one. The second is with some of the key findings on the Your Voice Matters and the Youth Risk Behavior Survey showing improvements with mental health measures as well as access to mental health resources. And then Ms. Johnson and I, in our tours this week and next, are really talking about encouraging staff to establish strong positive relationships so students can point to at least one individual in a school that they can have a strong relationship with for encouragement and support. And I know Ms. Johnson tells the story of, we know of many kids out there that tell us that unfortunately they don't have that resource in our school. But we also know of other individuals that say, when asked, yes, I have 20 individuals here in this school. So it's trying to get that consistency so that every student at least has one individual that they can find support and encouragement with and to go to. So we'll be looking at some of these performance objectives and refining them, and then we'll also be bringing with the monitoring reports a regular update on the progress that we're making, and this evening's presentation that Ms. Putnam is going to do actually begins that discussion. And then finally, we just wish everyone a happy day or a happy Labor Day weekend that's coming up a week from now. It sort of signals the end of summer. I know many of the surrounding school districts have started already, but we're one of the last ones. But I think that kind of keys us up, and everyone will get their last chance in the sun and be ready to come back with hopefully some cooler weather. So thank you.
Whose dog is that?
I don't know. The school and community folks, they're fooling around. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Board members, are there any questions for Dr. Murphy regarding his update? Mr. Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you. Could you just go over the new schools and the opportunity for the community to see them? I think you said they'll be having open houses probably next week for the parents and students,
Yes.
but non-parent student community members, are they going to have an opportunity to come and see? I know there's a lot of interest in the community about this.
I know that we are developing and we'll probably be posting a schedule of the various dedications, and I know Cynthia will probably be bringing those, or Ms. Johnson will probably be bringing those, as I just brought you the one about Montessori. So we'll let communities know when those dedications are happening, when those opportunities to visit. Has that been posted? I know I saw a preliminary draft of it, but I'm not sure it's been posted yet. Ms. Ashby?
We have not posted it publicly, but I do have the dates if you'd like me to share what they are. So as Dr. Murphy said, the Montessori Public School of Arlington dedication is on Thursday, the 29th of August. The Dr. Charles R. Drew Elementary School opening event will be on Saturday, September 21st, and that is at 11 a.m. Dorothy Ham Middle School will celebrate its opening on Friday, October 4th at 3 p.m. Alice West Fleet Elementary School will have an opening event on October the 19th, that's a Saturday, and that begins at 10 a.m. And the Heights will celebrate its opening officially on Saturday, October 26th, and that program begins at 10 a.m.
And thank you. And will those be, those opportunities will be for anybody, any community member, be it parent or student or
Correct.
Anybody?
So people can come tour the schools, and we'll post that information online.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I do have just one comment or question regarding the transportation. Will we be sending a school talk on that regarding what the weekend hours I think it might be helpful.
Yes, there's in fact, we have worked out a whole communications plan around the changes, and it includes those, and there will be several reminders too.
Thank you, we appreciate that. Okay, thank you, Dr. Murphy.
All right, thank you.
So we are now at the consent agenda. A couple of board members have asked that item C5, the human resource brief, be removed from consent, and the board will act on that item immediately following the vote on the remaining consent items. Do we have any speakers on the consent agenda? No speakers. Okay. Therefore, may I have a motion for adoption of the consent agenda as amended?
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. I'm pleased to announce that under consent, the board appointed members to the Arlington Special Education Advisory Committee and to the Career Center Building Level Planning Committee. And I just wanted to take a moment to share that regarding the Career Center Building Level Planning Committee, we did receive many applications for that committee, and we also received multiple applications for one slot representation. And so I wanted to take a moment, as we are getting feedback on the recommendation, that we really did take the time to review every single application. We wanted to bring new voices to the table and increase community engagement. We are grateful for the interest in this process. It's very similar to the Career Center Working Group, and we had a wonderful working group, a large working group that brought forth recommendations. And now we have another opportunity as we look at the building level planning piece to bring in more voices and different voices to the table to represent our community stakeholders. And we did carefully consider that to make sure that we were bringing as many voices to the table to discuss this wonderful project at the Career Center that will be a significant part of the community and Arlington Public Schools. And so we want to thank everyone who applied. We want to thank everyone for their understanding if they were not selected. We look forward to working with the members who are selected. As everyone knows, Ted Black was appointed as chair, and Dr. Kennanen will be the school board liaison. There are a couple of remaining slots that did not receive applications for some of the middle school PTAs, and so we will be reaching out to the school PTAs and community to find representation, so there may be some more appointments in the near future. We also approved the Arlington Community High School Alternative Accreditation application, and in addition, the board made the following appointments. Ms. Ann Oliveira was appointed Assistant Principal at Abingdon Elementary School. Ms. Oliveira, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Okay. Ms. Oliveira has 25 years of experience and began as an ESOL teacher for APS. Presently, she is the math coach and school testing coordinator at Campbell Elementary School. A conscientious and dedicated teacher, Ms. Oliveira utilizes best practices and demonstrates excellent management and communication skills. She understands the APS K-12 curriculum and values the use of assessments to guide instruction and monitor progress. Her experience with administering assessments and interpreting data are skills that will enhance her work as an administrator. Ms. Oliveira has also been a member of the lead teachers team and has participated in meetings related to expeditionary learning. She has credibility as an instructional leader, has handled many opportunities at Campbell, and is now ready to take the next step to become an administrator. Congratulations, Ms. Oliveira. Thank you. And do you have anyone here this evening that is celebrating your appointment with you? I brought my husband. Well, thank you. We also appointed Ms. Stephanie McIntyre as Assistant Principal at Tuckahoe Elementary. Ms. McIntyre has worked in a variety of school settings where she gained invaluable experience differentiating instruction for culturally and academically diverse children at various grade levels. Her experiences as a classroom teacher and resource teacher for the gifted have shaped her desire to make a larger impact and to have a greater understanding of division initiatives. As an APS elementary education teacher specialist, she has provided support to all elementary schools. She also understands special education policies and processes. She has developed, implemented, and monitored initiatives such as the preschool and elementary options application process and the Montessori program relocation, and her experience has strengthened her understanding of how to meet the needs of students, teachers, staff, and the community. We believe she is ready to serve as assistant principal at Tuckahoe Elementary School. Congratulations, Ms. McIntyre. Sounds like you have many people celebrating here with you, but would you like to acknowledge your family if they are here as well?
Well, my family is live streaming from the position.
Oh, great.
So I'm joined by Tuckahoe's principal, Mitch Pascal, and then
Excellent. Congratulations. Next, we appointed Ms. Reagan Soar as interim principal at Barrett Elementary School. Soar is a committed educator who has worked as a special education teacher in both self-contained and inclusive classrooms across grades 1 through 12. She has also been a mentor, teacher, and district-wide coach, a special education coordinator, and most recently, assistant principal of Barrett. As assistant principal, Ms. Soar has worked with students, teachers, and families to support behavior and classroom management, data analysis, curriculum, implementation, special education design, and implementation, and building management. She demonstrates expertise in meeting the unique needs of students, families, and teachers, and is skilled at building teacher capacity, addressing achievement gaps, implementing initiatives, and working collaboratively. We are happy to welcome her to this new leadership opportunity at Barrett. Congratulations, Ms. Soar. And do you have anyone celebrating this appointment with you this evening?
yes, I have my husband and my squad.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And finally, the reason Ms. Soar is stepping up as a Barrett interim principal is that Mr. Dan Redding was appointed interim assistant superintendent of human resources. Mr. Redding has been with APS for many years, serving as a teacher, instructional technology coordinator, elementary and middle school assistant principal, director of employee relations, and principal at Barrett Elementary School. While at Barrett, Mr. Redding managed substantial changes at the school and instructional levels, such as facilitating implementation of the workshop model in reading, writing, and mathematics. As Director of Employee Relations, he acquired knowledge of human resources operations, policies, and procedures. He supported implementation of regulations related to the Affordable Care Act, 403B regulations, and the move to online job applications and pay stubs. Mr. Redding is an effective administrator and leader whose work is characterized by energy, enthusiasm, and clear communication, and he displays a sense of fairness, equity, and passion for the entire school community. He is a strong leader, and his professionalism, organization, and dedication are qualities that will serve him well as interim assistant superintendent of human resources. We are excited that he will be rejoining the HR team. Congratulations, Mr. Redding. Do you have anyone here celebrating with you?
My spouse is also on the way to the beach. My son is at work, so I brought a dear friend and administrative mentor.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you for being here supporting. We are very excited for the appointments this evening, and while we still have a couple of vacancies, we are working on making sure that those are also filled. So thank you all for being here this evening, and thank you for stepping up to your leadership roles. We will now take up the human resources brief. And
Tanya, Ms. Talento, can we not make comments about some previous items? We're just going to move right on to this.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Were we not going to make comments on some of the previous items?
Yes, I think, thank you. Did you,
I'd like to make a couple of comments on the previous consent items.
Okay, great. And I do, before we move to that, I do want to thank Ms. Erin Wales-Smith for serving as interim Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. We're very grateful for the service that you've provided over the last year. Thank you. I know it's been a long year with a lot of work, and thank you for stepping up to that leadership role. Yes, Ms. Van Doren.
Thank you. I wanted to second that. Thank you to Ms. Wells-Smith for doing that, and for everybody in HR, because I know that there's been turnover and a lot of growth in that area, and thank you. And thank Mr. Redding for stepping up and working with your team. So thank you. The other comment I wanted to make was about the BLPC for the Career Center. Dr. Murphy probably doesn't remember this, but I applied to be on the Strategic Planning Committee years ago, and I was not selected, and I was not happy about that. But what I found was that the groups that I was advocating on behalf of, I found many people on the Strategic Plan Committee who would listen, and I was actually, I think, more effective because I was able to take my issues and lobby to those particular people and have multiple people, because I had the time to discuss that with several people. So there are many ways to have influence, and as the BLPC meets, the meetings are public, they're publicized, there's usually public comment time, and there's lots of opportunity to go back and forth between the various associations. So I encourage everybody who wants to have a voice to be involved, to attend the meetings, and make your voice heard. There are many, many ways to do that, and I think it's just, there are many ways to get at that involvement. So I understand the discomfort when you don't get selected, but please stay at the table, be involved, and maybe you'll be on the school board one day. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Talento, for letting me tell my story.
Thank you, Ms. Van Doren. I appreciate that, and I did forget to reinforce that all of the Career Center BLPC meetings are public meetings, and there will be space for public comment, and we will have an engage page which will allow you to submit any feedback, comments, concerns that will go directly to staff and be shared with the school board. And so please, they're open, you're welcome, and we had great public engagement at the Career Center Working Group from people who were not appointed to the working group, and it was very, I think, it's a great opportunity for people to grow, and so thank you for reminding us that there are many ways for that public comment and for sharing your story, because I think many of us, especially as you grow in leadership, find that sometimes you're not chosen to do things because you are doing so many other things and as well. So, and did anyone else have any comments?
I also want to take the opportunity to thank Erin Wales-Smith for stepping up to the Assistant Superintendent of HR job when we needed it the most, which is, of course, all the time that we need it the most. It is such a demanding and important role, and we can't thank you enough for taking it when asked, when Christy Murphy left back in October, and also continuing on as we search to find the right person, who obviously we did this evening. So thank you again for all of that dedicated service. Oh, and I want to the other item that on the consent agenda that I wanted to speak to is the Randolph modernization project. And speaking as a community member in that neighborhood, I'm delighted that we are finally resolving the issues with the HVAC system and the roof at Randolph Elementary, and I'm looking forward to actually going there on after school starts and enjoying the new climate system. So thank you, John, for making that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein.
Thanks.
Ms. O'Grady.
I have just a few items. I also want to thank Ms. Erin Wells-Smith for all of her hard work. It is hard work to ensure that we get high-quality teachers in our system, and we want to thank you for stepping in and helping and ensuring that we were able to do that over the last year plus. In addition to that, I wanted to also encourage people in our community to stay engaged on the Career Center Building Level Planning Committee. As was already stated, there were so many people who were interested in being involved, and if you were not chosen to be a member of the committee, we would still ask you to please go to the meetings, please stay engaged, ask questions, speak at public comment opportunities. This is going to be a school that could and will be accessible and already is accessible to every student in our system once they reach high school. And so it is one to keep an eye on, one to watch, and one that's very exciting as we continue to grow in our system. So I hope that people will be engaged, and I will also add to Ms. Van Dorn that I have not been on every committee that I have requested to be appointed to. So I hope that our community will stay engaged as well. And then the next thing I would also say is that we also approved members of the Arlington Special Ed Advisory Committee, and that is a very important committee. That committee represents members of our special ed community and is made up of parents, and those parents get the opportunity to talk about issues and concerns with our staff. They meet monthly. They usually meet the third or the fourth Tuesday of the month, and they start out their meetings with actual public comment periods. And so they have the opportunity to hear from community members who might have thoughts or concerns about the special ed system in our school. I want to thank the committee members for being on the committee, because I know it involves sometimes getting babysitters or leaning on spouses and others and family members to watch children while they come and advocate for the special ed community as a whole. So I want to thank the members of that committee. I've enjoyed serving over the last year and a half as the liaison to that committee, and I want to encourage the community members to come out if they have concerns and share them with the committee during their meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. So we will now take up the Human Resources brief. The Human Resources brief, I usually have a hard copy printed out, and I'm sharing it, but I was not able to do that today, so I apologize. It was a brief that was written by our Human Resources Department. It was very informative, and I think we have some questions and comments. So, Ms. Van Dorn, would you like to speak to this item first?
Thank you very much. Dr. Murphy, I'll address questions to you. So we received the Human Resources brief, which is chock full of information, and when you read it, you get just a thumbnail of just the beginning of what the Human Resource Department is doing. It's been going through a very thorough review of its functions and how it serves both in the recruitment and in serving our employees. And it's a big job, and it's a big job in a school system that's growing in leaps and bounds. And I think we've been through this kind of growth spurt before, like we did with transportation several years ago, and I liken it to that process. So for me, when I read the report, I would like to make two comments to you. One is that in the community, I'm asked sometimes, how are we doing on the strategic plan? What are you doing? How are you accomplishing your objectives? And it would be great if there was a thread through all these reports that visually blocks back to the strategic plan and then links to that monitoring report piece on the strategic plan page, so that we can all easily point to that and say, yes, we're tracking it, yes, we're working on it, this is our measurement, and then here are all the things we're doing, because we are doing a lot, and it's all to achieve those objectives. But it's a bit difficult to read all the information in that and see what those outcomes are. And so that's one piece of a request I have, and I encourage anybody else to read that and provide the feedback, because I think this is really the first year we're reporting out on that new plan and looking at it and looking at how we format that so we can take the community along with us and our staff along with us is really important. And then my second comment is in setting the goals for this coming year under those objectives. They strike me as being very aggressive, and perhaps they were drafted prior to some of the big change we were going through. And I would just encourage us to think about that and see, is that realistic, and do we need to rethink that in light of our current circumstances and look out, we're doing this plan 7 years, right? So where should those milestones be, and when should they be there? So I just don't want to create I know everybody has incredibly high expectations, but I don't want to either push ourselves at a time when we're still filling lots of positions and keeping the train running, to then put on top of that at a time of transition that kind of an expectation. So, while I'd love to do everything perfectly tomorrow, sometimes we need to give ourselves some peace and just, manage things. So that's the feedback. I wanted to provide that feedback to the report, and also it is 1/5 of one of our 5 major goals in the strategic plan: the care, the support of our staff, and the recruitment. And I think we just really should be deliberate about focusing on that, reporting on it, setting realistic expectations, and using that as sort of a template for how to connect that back to the strategic plan so that people can easily see and support us in the work.
And you and I have, I think, talked offline as well as other board members, and I think that theme of carrying through the strategic plan through all of our areas is something that we're going to be looking at. I also, too, want to recognize Aaron Wales-Smith and the HR team. You're right, we are growing, as many of you shared earlier, and so we're continuing to have to be competitive, but our teachers in our classroom and our staff that support our schools are integral to what we do. And so it's a competitive market, and we're looking at how we can continue to stay competitive. So I want to thank Aaron. I don't think our goals, by the way, are too aggressive. I think that's how we get things accomplished. And we always are able to adjust. But I think the fact that we will continue to grow and we will need to continue to attract people is something that we're looking forward to. And I think we will continue to get better at just many of the aspects of our human resource operation.
Thank you. Do I have any other board members with questions? Yes, Ms. O'Grady.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Ms. Van Dorn for sharing those comments. I have a few questions after having read the Human Resources brief, and they kind of come because I thought there was some very good information in there, and I want our community to know about it. One of the things I would be interested in knowing, Dr. Murphy, is how many new staff members did we hire this year, and if you could tell us a little bit about them in terms of, I know that the new teacher orientation, we brought on lots of people, and they come from various degrees of experience. And I thought that was interesting for our community to know.
Sure. We are currently right around 300 new hires. I shared earlier in our closed session that our staff has touched about 700 records between movements, promotions, and the onboarding of our new hires, which is really exciting. We're still collecting the data, but during our new hire orientation, we did ask folks, and Monique, you were there, to stand based upon years of experience. And what we're seeing is that we are continuing to attract teachers with a plethora of experiences, whether career switchers, whether coming from neighboring school divisions, whether they're new to their community, but a lot of them come to us with experience. We're seeing a lot of folks still coming with higher degrees as well. So we're seeing, again, a lot of teachers that are coming into the school division that are at master's plus 30 level, which also continues. We're looking into the diversity too, which is very important to us. It's important for students to be able to see adults that they can relate to, that adults that share their same backgrounds. And so the diversity is something that we continue to watch. It is one of our goals, and it's important for us to continue to increase that. So we are gathering our metrics. We did hire over 50 staff members just in 1 week, which is really an interesting trend for us. So once we get everything settled, we'll come back and report on what the demographics of our new hires look like.
And I just want to clarify one thing, because I know I got myself in trouble a couple of years ago about it. The newspaper picked up a headline and they ran with it. In my tenure here, we've averaged anywhere from 200 to 300 new hires. So we've grown, by the way. So we are about where we've been over that period of time. Granted, we were 20,000 10 years ago. We're eclipsing 28,000. So what we're seeing kind of with transitions and with growth, we're in the same ballpark or about the same area. So I think we're in very good shape, and I think I credit our principals also for a lot of hard work here during this hiring period.
And then I just have one last question. I know that we're really interested in improving our employee satisfaction, and that is part of our strategic plan goal. For me, one of the areas that also looks at is compensation, and I know that we're going to be looking towards compensation studies in the future, and I just wanted to know if you could share anything about that.
So we talked a little bit about where we are with our compensation study, and we have two really concurrent things that are happening. We're currently taking a look at our job descriptions and classifications and market rates to make sure that our employees are being paid at a comparable rate to folks that are in the same industry or the same type of work. We're also making sure that we get on a cycle of refreshing and looking at our jobs and their descriptions as we morph into a school division, as there's different needs out there. We're constantly making sure that we've got folks with job descriptions and duties and responsibilities that are clear for many reasons, but for making sure that they get professional learning that supports what it is that they do, and also to make sure that they're being evaluated in a way that's helpful and they're getting meaningful feedback. We also are going to be looking at our salary schedule, which is something that we've been asked to do through this last budget process. We know that we need to take a look at the number of salary schedules that we have. We also need to take a look at possibly moving towards something that's more universal with some pay banding. So that's work yet to be done. Currently in Human Resources, we are finishing the first phase of the first compensation study that I spoke to, and we hope to have that wrapped up so that when we step into the next piece of this work, that they will be ready to be concurrent and help us to be in a better place.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Goldstein or Dr. Cannon, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. So may I please have a motion?
I move that the board accept the human resources brief.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Now we will hear citizen comment on non-agenda items. Do we have any speakers this evening? Okay. Great. Well, then we will now move to our monitoring item. We have one monitoring item, the annual academic update. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, I'll do a short little introduction here to this, and I know we have folks from Teaching and Learning here this evening. I believe Sarah Putnam is going to be doing the lion's share of this evening's presentation, but I also know that Mr. Ty Bird is here, Director of Secondary Programs. You will hear from Ms. Putnam, and the reason I'm kind of highlighting this is the state accreditation process has really evolved. I made mention of this in my opening comments, but growth is a stronger aspect and component of us looking at accreditation. And while we set a standard for students to achieve, we also look at the progress they make from one year to the next. So we look at not only did they pass this year and previous years not pass, we also look at how much growth they experienced over the course of the year. And then we also look at the growth of our second language students. So it's a combination of many factors that roll up into what achievement looks like. And I think our principals have really tuned into the growth element as a priority. So I give that as a little bit of a backdrop. I know in the past we've brought the information forward in the way that it was designed, simply looked at a pass-fail. And now we have a much broader interpretation of what achievement looks like and how we see students progressing, which I think is the right tone to kind of strike. So that is a little bit of a backdrop. I hope that sets you up, Ms. Putnam, and I'll let you go ahead and lead us through this presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Thanks for having me to share our academic performance update from our 2018-19 school year data. As Dr. Murphy mentioned, we do have some key people here from the Department of Teaching and Learning. Carolyn Jackson from the Office of Equity and Excellence was here. She stepped out for just a minute, but she is here with us. And we have Ty Bird, who's our secondary director. Before I jump in, I also want to acknowledge up front the work of Helen Hartman, who works in planning and evaluation. She has been instrumental in helping prepare data for this evening, so I want to acknowledge Helen's work. Okay, so our overview for this evening, as Dr. Murphy mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about accreditation data, really about the standards and the highlights for APS. We've already heard a little bit about that with our 5-year accreditation. We'll do some connections to the strategic plan. So really there's 2 key performance objectives, number 1 and number 2, that we'll hit on tonight. We'll talk about the data related to that, really our goals for continuous improvement for this upcoming school year and what action steps we'll take to achieve those goals. And then I'll just wrap up the evening by talking about some of our key takeaways. So you saw this slide last year. We talked about the new standards of accreditation. I just offer this to you again as a reminder. Virginia really looks at those 3 big buckets in blue there: student achievement, achievement gaps, and then student engagement. The nice part about the student achievement piece, as Dr. Murphy mentioned, now we really do look at student progress as well as just, have you achieved on your SOL? Did you achieve a passing score? But if you have not achieved a passing score, have you at least demonstrated growth? And then we'll look more specifically tonight about the achievement gap data. I know in our strategic goal and our performance objective, we refer to it as opportunity gap. Virginia's standards of accreditation still refer to it as achievement gap, mainly because we look at how did they do on an assessment, and that's achievement data, so that's where that terminology kind of gets mixed there. And then finally, under student engagement, we won't cover much of that because a lot of that's not academic specific data, but they look for a decrease in absenteeism, a decrease in dropout, an increase in graduation. And we aren't there yet, but in 2021-22, we will be asked to measure the college career and civic readiness piece. That is a new part of our standards of accreditation related to the Virginia profile of a graduate. So, as you heard earlier this evening, we are accredited, I guess preliminarily, until we get the final results at the end of September for the 5th year in a row. And all of our schools had fully met, if you look at the overall indicators, for English, math, and science. All of our schools have met that. We also have consistently high performance overall, and it's worth noting that even with increased rigor and new testing requirements, that we continue to see that performance. So we dig in a little bit to look at the academic indicators. I mentioned sort of the buckets that the state looks at for accreditation. So I mentioned we met the overall academic indicators in English, math, and science. When we dig a little further and we look at the achievement gap data for English and math, we have a small percentage of schools who were near that standard. And if you look, it's just like the small little parts in yellow there. 3% for English and 13% for math. That is an improvement from last year. And when we dig in and say, okay, so what is the group that may not be making progress there? It's a small number of schools that's tied to the school data, but it's for students with disabilities and for our Black students. So those groups are not making necessarily the desired progress, but that helps us dig into that school level information and put supports in place to target the student needs. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the 2 performance objectives related to strategic plan goal, multiple pathways to student success. As a reminder, it's number 1 is really related to increased achievement and the elimination of the opportunity gap. And number 2 is related to students making 1 year's worth of growth. So as Dr. Murphy mentioned, we did decide to jump into this growth data and look at it in a different way this year. I know it's a busy slide because it shows you all of our student groups, but we looked at that accreditation data to look at both the pass rates and the growth rates for the various student groups. And I know there were some questions about how does this, or why does this look different on this slide from when you just look at a straight pass rate. So something to note here, there's something called the combined pass rate in Virginia. And Virginia calls that the combined pass rate because it's actually students who straight away pass their SOL, but then we also have students who are called or deemed recovery students. Those would be students who may have failed their SOL the previous year, but then we put in some supports and remediation efforts to make sure that they're successful the following year. And when they are, they count in our pass rate. So that's why, for instance, you might see I'm talking about the blue section here. That blue section of the bar includes people or students who passed, and then also students who received remediation and were successful the following year. So you'll see that the pass rate here looks higher because the overall pass rate that you might see later in the year, because or later in my presentation, because Virginia includes that in our accreditation data. The feds, when you look at ESSA, they don't do that. So that's why you'll see two different numbers. Let's talk a little bit about the yellow section there. That growth, this is just the math data, is measured by the increased performance on the math SOL. So the state has predefined tables that show that growth. So while a student may not have passed, if they demonstrated growth from one year to the next, that helps us know that the students have made progress. When we look at the combined rate, that's really, as an example, we look at all students in math for 2019. The number up above at the top says 93%. So that would be the combined rate for students who passed, students who may have counted as recovery because we remediated them and they were successful. And then we can add our growth as well onto that for a total, overall rate of 93. And when we look at it that way, we see that 93% of our students in this area had made a year's worth of growth, and they were successful according to the way that the Virginia Department of Education uses their accreditation standards. So that's a long way of explaining all of that. But it's a nice way to look at it because it honors the idea of growth. I included it also for English. And here there are just a few differences. The rate here is for reading and writing. They combine the reading performance on the SOL and the writing performance and just deem it English. And then also, we can look at an additional measure for growth. You can grow in your performance on your SOL, but you also can grow in your by using the access test. So that's the English language proficiency assessment that we use. So if a student has demonstrated growth on access, that also is captured there in the yellow section of all of our bars. So let's dig a little bit more into just the straight pass rates. This is would be what the ESSA requirements require us to do, so just students who have achieved a 400 score or higher. So this is related to performance objective number 1, and this is just for math. You can see we have incremental growth or progress for all of our student groups or subgroups in mathematics. And this is notable because the spring math 2019 assessments really do reflect more rigor with the new standards that were put in place. These results, I think, also help highlight how we're addressing the opportunity gap and making sure that we're purposely addressing the inequities to make sure that students are successful. I'm going to dig in a little bit more to some of the specific student groups. The first one would be English learners. Here, this stair step that you've seen probably in years past, we look at their performance of English learners by their English learner type. And we see that as students acquire English proficiency, they pass the SOL at a higher rate and really comparable to their peers who are not learning English. We also wanted to examine the pass rate for Black students in Arlington. So the pass rate for mathematics this past year increased from 71% to 77%. This pass rate exceeds the Virginia pass rate by 7%, and it does demonstrate significant growth. The math office there in Arlington has really helped lead some purposeful work, and the steps I've articulated here on the slide to help you see how they've helped address the gap. They have worked with teachers, coaches, and administrators to really engage in some high-quality professional learning around math workshop, some strategies, and some instructional structures that we would want to see in place. They've also they're going to continue this, but this past school year they held 4 different parent outreach sessions specifically for Black families focused on advocacy and supporting their learners at home. And then lastly, related to this, we've worked with counselors to have conversations about the role that they play to encourage Black students to enroll in the most rigorous coursework possible. And we'll continue to carry that work forward to make sure that we're providing supports for students in those courses so that they have prolonged success. The last group that we want to talk about are students with disabilities. So we see increased achievement, but we know that we need to make more progress. So for performance objective 1, we have this goal for the 2019-20 school year. And it's related to an increase in performance by at least 6 percentage points for students with disabilities. And on the right there, you'll see the steps that we've articulated to achieve that goal. We'll continue and expand the math workshop professional learning that teachers have gone through. Shannon Ellis, the supervisor of mathematics, has done a really nice job putting that in place for K through 8. All of the principals came, they engaged in learning with their math coach at their school, so they're all viewing instruction through a very common lens. They'll also continue to support content academies, so teachers are equipped to teach the more rigorous math standards there. And then something that we're excited about, and this isn't just specific to math, but it will impact math, is the implementation of the new student support process, which I think you're familiar with. We talked about it all last year. The nice part about it is I think the 2 big buckets will be consistency, which we hear a lot about, and monitoring. So through that new process, schools will be able to implement more consistent IEP services and really have more of a focus on inclusive practices. And the idea around monitoring, we will strengthen IEP goal writing, look at data, look at the progress monitoring, and then make sure we're aligning to the standards. So that process really does help streamline the services that students will be receiving. We recently, just this past week, finalized the student support manual that goes along with that new process, so schools will all have that. They now have it for the start of the school year. So let's shift gears a little bit and we'll talk about reading. Again, this still relates to performance objective number 1. And we did 2 years, if you've noticed, 2 years of data this year. The reason for, let me explain why we went back to just a 2-year trend. In the past, I think you have been used to seeing a 3-year trend. Even VDOE put out a 3-year trend. We felt strongly about going back to 2 because there's a point of distinction here. In 2018, ESSA requirements said that you couldn't include your former Ls, so students who have acquired English proficiency, you can't include them in your pass rate any longer. So when you looked from 17 to 18, it looked like a large drop. It's because a large pocket of students who had acquired English proficiency were no longer accounted for. So here, the 2 buckets that you see, 2018 to 2019, we're talking about, it's measured in the same way. And it also is the same 2 years where we now no longer have VGLA. I think you recognize that last year we talked about it. VGLA was a portfolio-based assessment that was aligned with grade level standards, and some English learners took that instead of the SOL. Last year was the first year where they were no longer allowed to do that. So they all took the SOL assessment, so that, to us, helps explain, in part, why there was a decline. So the new testing requirements. The other piece that I want to notice here, I'm going to switch to the next slide pretty quickly so that you can say, while it does look like we have a decline in progress, when we look at how are students doing, if we go back to slide 9 and you looked at that yellow section, 17% of our English learners are demonstrating growth, either through progress on the SOL or through access. So that we need to keep that in mind when we look at just the straight pass rates here. So keeping in mind that we no longer take former Ls into consideration, I think it's important to kind of jump to that next slide. Let's look at how are former Ls doing. These are students that we've had come through our system, and we look to see if we actually calculated former Ls, which would be our ELP6 students, we'd have an 86% pass rate for the reading SOL for them. So that is quite encouraging. So we see this stair step, that stair step helps us see that as students acquire English proficiency, they are passing the reading as well at either higher rates or rates that are comparable to their peers. So we like to shout that a lot when we talk to the work that teachers are doing, to say, look at the success that you are allowing students to have when they have time to learn English. They are outperforming. Again, we dig into the performance of Black students in reading, and we recognize in this case that the progress is flat. And so to address this gap, we're focusing on the steps that you see here. This year we'll have really focused professional learning, focus on phonemic awareness for K-2 teachers. So we know that this is the equity of access to a very consistent research-based practice. We want teachers to help students focus on learning sounds in words, which we know is helping them to learn how to read and how to spell. So students will receive daily, systematic, explicit, and sequential instruction in phonemic awareness. We believe that will have a great impact on our early readers. We'll continue our Literacy Academy to help build the capacity of teachers, and that's not just at the elementary level, that's at all of our levels. We have teachers who are teaching students who are older that are not reading on grade level, and they need to know, how do I address their literacy skills? We also know that we need to have more targeted focus on data analysis. So we have to evaluate where students are and respond to it. And this kind of goes back to that consistency piece that I mentioned earlier. We want to increase the consistency of monitoring and make sure that we're responding across all of our schools. And then lastly, we will be able to provide school-based support, really purposely targeted support for our schools where we know our Black students are not making the progress that we want. We'll work in collaboration with the Office of Equity and Excellence and English Language Arts to say, where is our biggest need and where can we put those extra supports in place so that when we're not making the progress that we want, we can have really targeted attention to the student. We know who those students are. We know what schools they are learning in, and we can target our support accordingly. Again, we have a reading goal related to students with disabilities. To achieve this outcome, we have these goals. We've done a lot of work the last 3 years around curriculum writing. English Language Arts was our first content area that we started with, so we're using consistent standards, we're using that curriculum to teach them, and we're making sure we have really great resources in place to support the instruction. As I mentioned, I put the student support process on this slide as well because it's going to impact really all of our content areas, but it will impact reading as well. The new student support process with the leadership of Dr. Kelly Krug really will help support student needs more consistently across schools. And the idea of that is helping schools know and families know how they can fluidly move in and out of the process so they don't have to start over, right? And then making sure that we're more efficient to make sure students are getting the support that they need right away. And then finally, we're continuing the RAN-RAS pilot. I think you've seen, we piloted it last year. It was an additional data point that we use in addition to PALS for our primary students to make sure that we're catching students who may have a reading disability very early. It was very successful this past year, so we have more schools jumping on board. Okay, our last piece relates back to growth again, performance objective 2, and it's based on our Access for ELS data. The blue portion of this bar, you saw something similar last year, shows the students who are making expected growth. And the yellow bar, the yellow part, are students who have not yet made expected growth. For this, when we look at it internally, those are the students who are entering school at the same level for the third year. That's when they are flagged for us to say, okay, you are stuck at perhaps level 3. What are we doing? Like, we have to look at the supports that are in place because we don't want you there for 3 years. That's sort of the red flag for us. By using the Access for ELS data, we see that students at that lower proficiency level tend to develop their language more quickly, which is good news, right? Our level 1 students have more English we want them to acquire. So it's nice that it shows us this result here, but we need to look to see why do we have more students at our ELP4 level that seem to be at that stuck part, where they're entering the same level for the third year. We do recognize when we peel back the layers and we look at students, particularly at the secondary level, the students at the lower proficiency level are making more growth because we have them in different settings. They are in a more self-contained setting where they are receiving more supports. So that's something to think about. What can we do about those supports if you're a student who may not be in a really sheltered environment to still make sure that you are making progress? All right, lastly, we have our key takeaways. When we look at the progress, again, our 5th year in a row, and we really want to think about individual student growth. We know that growth measures help highlight the progress of students, but I think it's nice we're really thinking about learning as a progression, right? It's not just this end-all be-all. We look at student performance through that growth lens, and we can see that the progress students are making. We know they're not all where we want them to be, but we have the information to be able to address those needs. So to focus on improving teaching and learning experiences, we know we will be receiving some recommendations very soon from our program evaluations. There's 2 big ones that we have coming, the services for students with special needs, and then for English learners as well. This upcoming school year, we're also very excited about the focus on equity and the equity cohorts that we have at the schools. That work will help address the unconscious bias that we see throughout APS. I've referenced the student support process quite a bit. Consistency is the name of the game there. And then really our work will continue. In order to improve outcomes for students, we're going to continue the work related to our instructional framework. What do we want to see happening in classrooms? Our curriculum, what do we want teachers to be teaching? And then really the professional learning framework. What do our professionals need to engage in so that they can best meet the needs of our students? So with that, I thank you. And I'll take any questions that you might have, and I'm going to take a drink of water.
Thank you, Ms. Putnam. We appreciate the presentation. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, we have one speaker.
Okay. And before we invite the speaker up, I'm going to go through the speaker guidelines since I did not do that earlier. The school board welcomes public comment and allows comment at most regular board meetings. If you would like to speak, but I should have said this earlier and I apologize. If you would like to speak but have not signed up electronically, you must submit a speaker slip to the clerk before the agenda item you wish to speak on is called. Speakers are called in the order in which they sign up. However, if there are student speakers, we invite them to speak first so they do not have to stay out late on a school night waiting for their turn. Each speaker may speak for up to 2 minutes, and there's a timer to help you keep track of your time. The timer begins when the speaker starts speaking, and you should conclude your remarks when the buzzer sounds. To ensure all speakers are understood, regardless of their native language, the board has made the following revision to current guidelines. If a speaker addresses the board in language other than English and an interpreter's present, the speaker will have 2 minutes to speak, and the interpreter will have up to 2 additional minutes to translate the comments for the board. All comments should address matters related to Arlington Public Schools. Speakers should be courteous and address your comments to the entire school board. Generally, board members do not respond to public comments at meetings. If you have written comments, please give them to the clerk to distribute to the board. We ask the audience to refrain from applauding. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Lisa Blackwell, Kenmore, back again because, you know, this is my passion. I need 100% of kids on grade level. I will never stop saying that until we reach that goal. I was really interested to see the way this year we're reporting that we're accredited because we're doing this, and this, and these are the numbers that add up. But we spend more than $500 million in Arlington County. Being accredited in all our schools is the baseline. That's not enough. We still have problems on, as Ms. Putnam just showed, the economically disadvantaged children, the English language learner children, and the students with disabilities. When I looked at the reports from BDOE and I was looking at each school and looking at the accreditation, since that's what we're going to look at this year, I saw too many students having no growth in the last academic year. And I saw too many schools that not only did they have students with no growth, the percentage of students with no growth increased. I would like to know, because my understanding was that ATSS was put in place last year, how ATS is actually helping us address these issues. I would love for you all to have ATSS staff come and make a report for all of us so that we can understand what they're doing and what they're telling the parents of these students so that they can have more success in our system. I also would like to know, because we don't break it out individually because we say they're programs, how the students at HB Woodlawn and Arlington Tech are doing. So if we can have those reports done so that we can see how those students are faring, I would appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Blackwell. Ms. Putnam, thank you again for the presentation. Board members, do you have any questions on the presentation? Okay, Ms. Van Doren?
First, I want to thank you, Ms. Putnam, for the presentation. It was very informative. I read it last night. I understood it better when you presented it today. It's frustrating to get used to the way the SOLs were reported and now have a new system. I'm still trying to figure that out, and like Ms. Blackwell, I went back to the data in the VDOE site and read the data my way because I just couldn't absorb it that way. So thank you for the presentation because it helps me begin to see how we're reporting to the state, but I still like to see it the way we're reporting to the federal government because it's just the way I'm used to it. So. But thank you for the presentation. And I had 3 points I wanted to make. One is thank you very much for the continued work on the students with disabilities, in particular in reading, and implementing that RAN-RAS, which many of us who have been working on the issue for a long time believe that if we were catching the kids at that point, we would be seeing major gains. So to finally have that in place, and I hope you all are going to commit to that. I know you can I know those interventions are now there. You've trained up staff. I would love to have seen some of those results already, but I'm hoping that maybe there's some bright spots where you are seeing them, but I can't see them in that data. Sure. But I'm hopeful now that you've got the interventions in place, you're pushing for consistency. And if you have this RAN-RAS in place, you can catch the kids as early as possible, and that we should see gains.
Correct.
Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Okay, so thank you for doing that, and thank you for being one of the leaders in the state and putting that in place in Arlington. So thank you for doing that. When I'm going to talk to Dr. Murphy and Ms. Johnson for a minute. When we get these presentations, it would be helpful to me if we were consistent in what we were reporting out, because, for example, on slides 10 and 11, we did the math. We looked at the math data, but then we didn't go and look at the English data. And I know that the English data went down, and it feels like we're just showing the good news, which is fine. I think we did a great job with math. Clearly, there was a focus. Lots of energy went into that. Again, I'd want to be watching those English ones so that I can see as you get these gains. But we switch every year, and it's disconcerting. And then when something's gone, I wonder why it's gone. And I know all this work is being done, but if we're going to drill that, show all that about math, let's also show it about English and say, yep, it did go down a little bit. And I know you did do that later, but I think it would have been very illustrative to do it in similar slides to the math ones, because it would have been very stark, because I looked at those drops. And I know that you're working on it, and I know if you were to put up there everything you're doing, I know it's going to pay off. But I would like us to be transparent with that data and consistent. It's hard to switch around how you present data, Dr. Murphy and Ms. Johnson, on a regular basis, and then feel like we understand how we're progressing. Because if we're monitoring and the community is monitoring and not getting in the weeds, if we can have consistent ways to monitor, that would be really, really helpful. And I just have to speak about the area. You know, I'm going to, well, one thing, I have been approached by some previous ESOL Hilt teachers who would very much like to provide their advice and guidance, particularly people who were very adept at the self-contained model, who really know how to work. So you have a pool of teachers out there who are willing to help you, so just keep that in mind. And then I want to just point out on, you had a slide on, I think it was page 14, you don't have to go to it, the rates for the students with disabilities. Okay, that one. And the EL data, I'm going to point out the students with disabilities right now. That just doesn't budge. And I will remind everybody that I think it's about 8% of students with disabilities have intellectual disabilities. So that means over 90% of the kids with disabilities have no intellectual difficulty learning. So that this is stuck just frustrates me. But I'm hoping, because I know you're focused on this, that having the right tools in place, and when I come in, I watch all the training that's up, and I see that you're doing targeted training with specific interventions that meet specific kids' needs, plus the RAN-RAS, that hopefully that will move. I want to see that going the other direction. But I just always point that out because sometimes when we talk about the unconscious bias, it's about different cultures, but it's also about an unconscious bias about kids with disabilities. I got an email recently with an ecstatic mother with a nonverbal autistic child with autism who was over the moon because the child had passed her SOLs. Years ago, that would have not even been attempted. And now we are. So I know anecdotally we're making progress, but I hope we keep going. So I'm cheering, but boy, I'd like to see that needle move.
I think I'll add one of the other things that's in place now with the new student support process, using our student support coordinators too. I think we'll have in most of our schools the coordinators there 4 days a week. Principals are ecstatic about that. And they'll be able to work very closely with both regular education plus special education teachers to make sure that we are catching students who are not making progress and really early on putting the supports in place. Part of that student support manual really has nothing to do with special education. It's just what supports do we need to have in place as part of ATSS that is our tier 1 support. But having those student support coordinators in that role now, I think will really help target students who may fall into tier 2 or tier 3 to make sure that we're putting the right supports in place and move that needle.
Anyone else have questions? Ms. O'Grady?
Thank you, Ms. Putnam, for the presentation. I found it was very enlightening and helpful. I especially enjoyed learning what we're going to do to try to address some of those opportunity gaps that exist. And some of the things that you talked about included more professional learning, and I didn't know if some of that professional learning is already underway with teachers returning back to school. And I didn't know if you wanted to tell us a little bit about that.
I was doing some of it this afternoon. So even with our first day back, teachers reported to school today. But as early as this afternoon, some folks engaged in professional learning. Tomorrow, for instance, is our secondary day where we really focus on supporting our middle school and high school teachers, and they will go to the content area that they teach. So all math teachers will come together. And one of the common threads that is woven through both the secondary pre-service professional learning as well as the elementary is the work behind equity. So we're all carrying forward the same message related to equity to say, what unconscious bias might you possess? Thinking about like the lenses of difference, which I think we have brought to you previously. That's part of the deep equity work, but helping teachers realize the lenses that they may view students through, but also how students see themselves, and making sure that we are just having an increased awareness about the things that we bring into the classroom as well as the experiences that students bring into the classroom. Once you acknowledge those, I think then you can really think about how are you designing your instruction to meet the needs of students who come from a different background. So that definitely is a common thread that we are weaving in within the first week of school, but that's that's the kickoff, and that will be really one that kind of carries throughout. I mentioned the fact that we were excited about our equity cohorts. This is year one where we have schools where we will be training key leaders. They have identified a deep equity team that we will provide professional learning to, sort of a train-the-trainer model throughout the first half of this school year, and they will implement that training with their school staff. The nice part is it won't be something where people from the outside are coming in. They will be led by their colleagues in this work. So we train them first, and then they go back to their schools to make sure that they're carrying that same message forward. So we're excited about that. Carolyn, how many schools is it? I think it's almost 12. Okay, I was going to say 10. So we have some staff from central office, but schools were able to say, yep, we are ready. We want to be part of Deep Equity Cohort 1. And that really is something that they will continue on for the 3 years, but this is the first year where we will have all those school teams really engaged in that work, which is exciting. Sure.
Mr. Goldstein?
Thank you. Thank you for the detailed presentation, Sarah. I just had a couple of questions. Can you go to slide 5, please?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what my question was here. So I guess I got confused between the labels of, one label of a bar is academic achievement for English, the other one is the achievement gap for English.
I can explain.
Yeah, please.
So academic achievement would just be straight out achievement of did you pass? Where they look at the gap, they look at the achievement of different subgroups. So for instance, we could drill down to a specific school and say, you did not meet the indicator for a specific student group related to English. So I think in this case, it was Black students at one of our schools. That's why it's a very small percentage. One of our schools, they did not make the progress for that particular subgroup as it relates to their performance in English. So the gap English and the gap math categories really look at the performance of all of the different groups that you kind of see even at the bottom there. So it's by race and ethnicity, as well as economically disadvantaged English learner and students with disabilities. So we have all of that broken out for each individual school.
Okay, and the 100% of APS schools met the quality indicators in English and in math and in science.
Got it.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's fine, but what matters is really digging into the gap groups, right? Because if you just stay at that surface, you don't really see where we have room to grow.
Now, were there other categories that are not listed here besides English, math, and science?
No, those are the only ones they use. And this is for, keeping in mind, this is the Virginia accreditation, and this is what they say they look at when they deem whether a school is accredited or not.
Okay.
Those are the buckets.
All right, thank you. That's helpful. Can you go to slide 12, please? And, oh, yeah. So the percentage passing for Black students went from 71% last year to 77% this year.
Correct.
Is that a statistically significant change?
So it is for us in that it still is also above where the VDOE is, the state is. We know that is even, I think I said it earlier, our pass rate is 7 points higher than Virginia. But knowing that we have more rigorous standards and just different assessment requirements now, the fact that still increased is notable.
So a variation of 6 percentage points on a base of 71% is statistically significant. It's not something that we could possibly see as a result of chance.
No, I don't believe so. And really, the steps there that you see, those were things that we did do and we will continue to do, because I think that in part contributed to the results that you see there.
Yeah, so that was the next question I wanted to ask, and I think I could ask it this slide or the next one, but I think they're both talking about the same thing. And that is, are these the same strategies that we're planning on using for next year? Are they the same ones we've used this past year?
So on slide 12, those were strategies that we had in place that we are planning to continue, mainly because we saw the impact that they had. And then the steps that you see here on slide 13, some are a continuation. In some ways, they are an expansion. So we've looked at Math Workshop Professional Learning. Now that really we'll see it, it's in a good place for elementary. Shannon Ellis with the math office worked really hard to get up and running, and teachers ready to do it at the middle school level in grades 6 through 8. And this year, we'll really be refining what that practice looks like with the school administrator working closely around that. And then one of the things that's new on here is the implementation of the student support process, as I mentioned. Last year, we worked in developing all of that work, and now it's ready to be implemented. So it's sort of a mixture of continue plus add.
I guess that's the general characterization of my question. When you see, good improvement, I would assume that we're going to continue on with the same strategies, and when we're not seeing the kind of improvement that we would hope, we would change strategies.
Sure. If it was something that we've had in place for 2 or 3 years and we aren't seeing the results, we would say, is this really what we need to be doing? Ms. Van Dorn brought up the RAN-RAS pilot piece. We only had that in place for a year, so we're expanding. This is related to reading, but we want to see, is that making an impact? If we look at data over the next 3 years and we see it's not doing what we needed to do, maybe it's something else that we need to put in place. But until we have evidence to say that it's not working, we're not going to change it. It takes a while to see the impact of things that you put in place.
So going back to what Nancy said about trying to look at these results, apples to apples, from year to year, which is difficult because of the way things change. Right. It would be useful to me to, on these slides, have some kind of clear display of the effort in the strategic plan context. So the performance objective, so for instance, we have a 6-year goal for a performance objective for this, and that is increase, some percentage number. Yep. And then you also probably have a 1-year goal that, between this year and next year will increase, that number.
You got it.
And so, I don't know, have that, as a bumper sticker or something so I can...
You'd like to see both.
I'm sorry?
You'd like to see both then. So this is our short-term goal just for this upcoming school year, but you kind of want to also see the long-term goal.
Yeah, kind of just give me the context
Sure.
of what you're saying here in the context of the larger strategic plan. Don't forget, it's a 6-year plan. After 6 years, we want to be here. 1 year, we're going to be here. These are the strategies we're going to employ. You've got the strategies. But that kind of relating it back to the strategic plan's metrics would be useful.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Kinnan, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Let me start off with a quick story from the fair. Katie, Crystal, and I were working at the census booth, and we had a trivia wheel. And an elementary age girl came up, and Katie asked her, no one would know the answer to this question, but we were always coaching people through the answers. What % of children ages 5 and under were not counted in the 2010 census? Part of the point is we're trying to educate people. The girl very quickly said 100%. And Katie looked, she said, "Why did you say that?" Do you know why? She said they hadn't been born yet. And that is why standardized tests are not a good measure of a child's abilities, critical thinking, and in fact is even a good example of cultural bias. Because as adults, we know what the census is and we know what that question meant. But she actually heard the English language is vague in many ways. And there was a context that we understand. And her context was she knows who 5-year-olds are, and they had not been born in 2010. I think one could write an essay about how that illustrates the flaws in standardized testing, and that you can thank Katie for that, yeah. So that sort of sets the context of some of the things I want to ask you, because as Dr. Murphy knows, I have beaten the drum for many years about how we really take these standardized testing results too seriously. And so this is not a critique of the work that our staff is doing or our teachers. In fact, it's in support of our teachers who really feel that, when we judge teachers by these scores, it's really unfair to the great work they're doing, and they don't measure all the capabilities that our students are learning over time. So having said that, I want to ask you maybe the hard question first, and maybe this is a little unfair, but so 83% of students in 2019 passed our reading, APS students. I think that's what the federal slide said.
There you go.
83%.
Correct.
Do you believe that 17% in reading, do you believe that 17% of our students cannot read?
No. And that's why I think it's important to look at the slide at the beginning that has reading data as well, because you can say that while they may not have passed an SOL, they've grown, right? And I know there are flaws in the measure, right? This is an assessment that we know all students are taking. I'd love, like you, to move beyond a standardized test, and I think we'll get there slowly. We have opportunities in different content areas to use performance assessments that really are a better measure of how students are thinking and problem solving. I think VDOE kind of is eager to put it in place, and then there's always some sort of one step forward, 2 steps back in actually getting that to come to fruition. So no, I don't believe it's 17% that aren't able to read, particularly because when you look at this, if you look at 91%, we know you value growth. Students have made progress either from one year to the next, or also just are learning to speak English if we're using the access measure. So they're growing in different ways, right? So I agree with you. I would love to use different measures as well to be able to say, what is it that students can do? I'll put a plug in this afternoon when I went to do training. We have schools that are switching to a different form of reporting, really standards-based reporting, and then thinking about that idea of proficiency. Have you met the standard? Have you demonstrated mastery of that standard? Or are you close, or are you just starting? And it values that idea of learning as a progression. It's not just about a number, it's how do you demonstrate your mastery of something. So I'm excited about that as well. It's going to be a different way of measuring student success.
And despite the fact that we don't have that right now, I think it is the case that our teachers do have a variety of ways that they work with our students, and PALS testing in K2, et cetera. They're getting a sense in using a variety of measures and understandings how our students are doing.
Right, and using PALS data to say what areas of need. So when we break down PALS data, we can see exactly where they may be having difficulty, and then we can put the proper supports in place to address their need. Related to that, I mentioned the phonemic awareness training, but we are also doing a very heavy lift around phonics as well to make sure that students are learning and teachers are putting supports in place around that, because we know if that's in place, you are going to have students reading on grade level, which is one of the things that we really are wanting by third grade.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that deeper explanation. I've long suspected that while we're not perfect, our data are better than they appear when we do that black and white pass-fail approach. And this here, with the growth measures, which were advocated for many, many years at our state, at the state legislature, also helps us understand that there are the kids who were otherwise showing up as didn't pass, many of them are experiencing growth as well, and you're getting to a smaller set of kids who aren't fitting into any of those boxes yet. And I think it's probably the case that you have those things happening in more cases than this data are demonstrating to us. Again, always more work to do. But yeah.
The important part to me, when we looked at this with some of our content supervisors, we said it's great to see it, but we want to see the yellow portion being even larger, right? To say, okay, so we know not all students are going to hit that 400 magical pass mark, but if we know that they're still making progress, we want to see a larger chunk of yellow at the top of each of those bars.
All the way to 100%.
You got it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Putnam. I do have a question as well, and it's really clarifying. So in this chart in particular, the yellow piece, the yellow portion is growth. So would that mean, for instance, in our Black students in 2019, 75% of them passed the SOL English, and 5% of them did not pass but grew?
Yes. So 75, in this one, that 75 is two different things.
Okay.
They definitely passed.
Okay.
It may not match what you see on the other line graph, because as I mentioned earlier, it's students that might have passed, but also may have failed the previous year and then passed. So they all are passes, but some of those passes receive sort of additional credit because of the remediation efforts.
Okay.
They went from a fail to a pass, so the accreditation kind of deems that as a recovery, and they give you additional credit for the fact that students are now successful the next year. The 5% would be students who failed but still demonstrated growth.
Year growth.
So we get growth tables defined from the state. So if I failed my third grade math SOL, but then the next year I fail again, but I still increased in my performance, I may show up in that 5% piece. It doesn't account for the students who failed and did not make progress. Those are not captured in that bar at all.
Okay, so then in that case, we could say that 20% for our Black students did not make progress last year.
Correct.
And that's the data that we're now looking at, that we're digging deeper into to determine what support systems worked for our students who did grow, what support systems are working for our students who are passing, and what do we need to put in place for our students who are not making progress. Right. And it goes back to what Dr. Cannon was saying, is that we need to measure growth, not necessarily test scores, but the tests allow us to have a baseline for growth measurement.
You got it.
Okay.
And the nice thing about this, I told you this is based on what the schools receive at the very granular level. It's the school accreditation data, so the schools will look at their individual data. They know exactly the students that fall into the different groups, like who passed or who failed but still made progress, and doing exactly what you said. What supports did we try? What didn't work? What supports might we need to put in place in the future so that they are experiencing growth in the upcoming school year?
So I wanted to thank you for your presentation. A lot of my colleagues asked some of the questions that I also was wondering about, and I appreciate the information you provided us. I think we all do this evening. I know that last year we had an academic update work session mid-year where we really broke down the data and were able to see students separated out of these particular groups that were required to report to the Department of Education. But what that did shows what it did. What I'm seeing this year different than last year is that our staff really looked at that and started trying to address students, really understanding their needs as a student based on, whether they fit into multiple groups, the identifier groups that require different needs, whether they were just, maybe it was a reading disability, being able to look at the student individually versus in groups, and then working through our support systems. And while I know that change takes time, and recognizing what is working is not something we're going to know through a year, I'm grateful for the work and efforts that are going into that. And I think I will mimic some of my, or support some of the things that my colleagues have said in helping us, showing your work because we know you're doing it, helps us to then share that message with our community, who is also looking at the data and asking questions. But this way we now have the ability to say, we see the data, we know where our successes are, we know where our failures are, and here are the ways that we're trying to address and maintain, address the failures and maintain the successes. So thank you.
Thanks.
We really appreciate the information.
I appreciate the chance to come and show you what we have in place, and highlight the growth that we're making, but also acknowledging that we need to stay the course with the things that we need to put in, do differently so that we see a different result in the future. So.
Great. And I do think we have an academic update work session scheduled again this year, so we look forward to it.
See you then.
Thank you.
Maybe I won't be here.
Well, thank you for your work, and please thank your staff for the work that they're doing.
Thank you very much.
So we are now moving to a new agenda category this evening. We are introducing a new agenda category tonight called information/action items. In the past, there have been periods where we have brought forth an information item and acted on it that same night. And we had gotten feedback from community members that they were not aware we were acting on it. So this year we're trying something new where we are actually going to, when on the rare occasions that we have that, we're going to actually show a separate agenda item that says information action item, so people know that these are items that are being brought forth for information that we intend to act on at the same board meeting. It's not something that we try to do or intend to do often, but for instance, the items that we're hearing tonight for information that require action will ensure that we are ready to move on the first day of school, supporting our staff and our students. So for the first of these items is an agreement with Highland Holdings, LCC for Career Center Parking. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Talento. There are several items that fall into this category, and I think you have done a wonderful job in describing this new category that has been created. Mr. Chadwick is going to talk about the specifics of the information item, and then Mike Frieda from our Budget and Finance Office is going to talk about the financials around them. So they will do this as a tag team. And Mr. Chadwick, if you could start with the first item around the Career Center parking, and I see Mr. Frieda is joining you.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. So the first item is a lease agreement with Highland Holdings, LLC for Career Center Parking. Highland Holdings is the ECDC, the Ethiopian Community Development Corporation. It's the company that owns the building and the parking garage. So off-site parking for the Career Center staff is required because of the installation of relocatable classrooms for Arlington Tech on the existing Career Center parking lot this summer. We recently concluded negotiations with Highland Holdings for access to use 50 spaces for a 12-month, actually we use them for a 10-month duration and can renew. And based upon availability and mutual agreement, we may lease them and up to an additional 50 spaces. We've leased them in the past for construction workers and for staff at Jefferson and previously for staff at the Career Center. We will pay a rental rate of $85 for each parking space per month, and we'll rent them for 10 months of the year. And this agreement has been reviewed and approved by legal counsel. The recommendation is to authorize the chair to execute the parking lease agreement. And as I said earlier, the agreement was reviewed and approved by legal counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Are you done with the presentation?
I am.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. Do we have any speakers? Okay. Board members, do you have any questions regarding the presentation? Okay, hearing no questions. Thank you. Board members, are you ready to act on this item? And if so, may I have a motion?
Yes, I have a motion, Ms. Chair. I move that the board authorize the chair to execute the agreement with Highland Holdings LLC.
Is there a second?
Second?
I recognize that Ms. Van Doren isn't here, so I'm going to ask my colleagues who have been former chairs. We can pass the motion and then just recognize her absence, or do we wait? Do you have any guidance for me? I just recognize it after I call the motion.
My guidance would be that, given the time and the hour, that we wait. And I'm anticipating the vote would be unanimous, but that way you may want to just take a short recess.
Well, why don't we go on to the next item's
Okay.
presentation, and then we will go back to the first item and take action on it. Thank you. So the next item that we are going to hear about is proposed funds transfer for Career Center parking. Dr. Murphy?
All right, there are two items that have to do here with parking, and the first is at the Career Center. So, Mr. Frieda, I believe you have this item, and we'll speak to it.
Okay, good evening. As Mr. Chadwick has indicated, that there's a lease for parking spaces at the Career Center to provide the spaces that were lost, and $42,500 is needed for this lease agreement. Finance has identified the major construction reserve as an appropriate funding source, and the Finance Department recommends the board transfer $42,500 for the major construction reserve to the operating budget for the leases.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers on this item? Okay, thank you. So, board members, we're going to act on then item F1 and item F2, which is the one that we just heard. So we'll start, oh, and I'm sorry, are there any comments and questions regarding the proposed funds transfer for the Career Center parking?
Yeah, actually, I want to speak to all three of these info action items. As everybody knows, I'm not a big fan of doing info and action all at the same time because I think in most cases we need to give the community time to understand what the item is and, you know, bring questions or comments to us before we take action. However, the calendar doesn't always sync up with the need for these items to be approved, and this is unfortunately a time of the year when that happens quite a bit. So I am going to support this. I just want to reiterate that when it is possible to separate them into info and action, I'm a big fan of doing so.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Colleagues, anyone else have any questions or comments regarding either of the first two items? Okay, I'm hearing no desire for comments, so we're going to act on the agreement with Highland Holdings LCC for Career Center parking. Is there a motion, or may I have a motion?
Motion and second happened, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. We did have a motion on that one and seconded and then recognized that Ms. Van Doren was absent. So I apologize for that. So we're then going to move on that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So that motion passes 5-0. Next item we're going to act on is the proposed funds transfer for Career Center parking.
Yes, I have a motion.
Great, thank you.
I move that the board authorize transfer of $42,500 from the major construction reserve to the operating budget for the parking lease for Career Center parking.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we will hear the proposed funds transfer for parking at the Heights. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, this is a second item here, and Mr. Chadwick, I think you have the front end of this, and Mr. Frida will follow.
I do. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. So this item is for transfer of reserve funds for staff parking at the Heights building in Roslyn. According to the agreement between Arlington County and Penzance, which is the developer of the property to the east of us, APS is to receive 100 parking spaces in the new Penzance building in the parking garage when that building is complete. Under the same agreement, Penzance is to provide 100 parking spaces in a different building until the new building is complete for our staff. While the spaces in the new building will be regular self-park spaces, that means that anyone who uses them can drive themselves in and out. The temporary spaces in the temporary spaces in the temporary building are tandem spaces which require valet parking, and in fact, they're not just tandem. Some of them are 3 or 4 deep. We have tried to negotiate that, and unfortunately not been successful. And in order to avoid having staff have to wait for their vehicles and have them essentially valet parked at both drop-off and pick-up, additional parking spaces need to be leased in other garages. Funds of $60,000 are needed to pay for these additional parking spaces. The rate is $120 a month per vehicle. That represents a $20 discount from the standard rate for bulk purchase of them. It's a month-to-month agreement, so if we need less parking spaces, we don't need to release all of these. And we really are waiting to see what happens when the school is fully set up with all the teachers arriving every day and how many spaces we actually need. And I'm going to hand it over to...
And again, Finance has identified the major construction reserve as appropriate for the transfer, and therefore we recommend that $60,000 be transferred from the major construction reserve to the operating budget for the leased spaces.
And if I may add one thing that I think you would be interested in, we have determined that there are 4 staff at the Heights building, between the Heights building and the 2 programs in it, who have handicapped parking stickers. So we've leased 4 spaces directly across the street in the parking garage so that they won't be any further from the building than necessary.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have any speakers on this item? Okay. Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you. John, you said this is $60,000 is needed, and for what term is that?
That is for 10 months. What we believe we need, we will be able to build into the budget for next year.
So that'll take us to the end of the school year?
The end of this current school year, yes, that will start in September.
Okay, and then when will the Penzance garage and its 100 spaces be ready?
Right now, I did inquire from the county what the latest schedule was, and they expect it to be completed in the 3rd quarter of 2021. It is proceeding quite quickly. They're almost out of the ground.
The 3rd quarter of calendar 21 or fiscal 21?
Yes, calendar 2021. So September
Quarter
2021, they should be, they might be ready for the start of the school year 21-22.
So that's a year from now?
2 years from now.
2 years from now, right, thank you. Okay, so that means we're going to need at least another 60,000.
Well, we really have to wait and see what the parking pattern is and how many people are actually using it. And we're doing a lot of transportation demand management measures, and it is rich in transportation and public transit in that area, so we're really waiting to see just how successful we can be with that.
We're going to need something.
We will need something, yes.
Yeah. I know this is kind of a complicated story, but can you describe a little bit about our negotiation with the county in as much as they did promise us 60 temporary spaces until 100 temporary spaces until the Penzance building is finished, but we find out now that they're really tandem spaces, which is largely inconvenient, so that
been here just on that. This is something we're continuing to explore with the county. I think where we are right now with the pressure of having to open up school, the pressure of the fact that we've got several individuals who need handicap spacing. I've been speaking directly with the county manager. I actually mentioned it to him tonight, and I know Ms. Talento has been speaking with the county chair. So those conversations will continue to go on. I think right now we want to make this adjustments so we address our staff needs. This is part of morale. We've worked very closely with the principals at the Heights. I know Ms. Johnson has been in conversations with both of them. So I think in the best interest of supporting our staff at this point in time, I'm advocating that we move forward with this recommendation. And I know Ms. Talento and I and Ms. Johnson will have follow-up conversations with the county to kind of pursue where we need to be with this.
Okay, thank you.
And I just will share that I did put a phone call in and left a message with the chair of the county board to share with him that we would be taking action on this item and that it was a month-to-month lease and that we were hoping to continue to find a way to see if there is something that we could move forward with. So I just wanted to share that with my colleagues. Any other comments or questions? Okay. All right, so board members may I have a motion, please.
Yes, Chair Talento, I have a motion. I move that the board authorize transfer of $60,000 from the major construction reserve to the operating budget to provide approximately 50 additional parking spaces for staff at the Heights building.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for the presentation and the information.
Thank you.
We have 3 information items tonight. And so first, we will hear proposed revisions to School Board Policy G-3.2.4, leave. Mr. John Cafferkey, our legal counsel, will present the proposed changes. And thank you, Mr. Cafferkey, for being here this evening. We're very appreciative of that.
Good evening, members of the board. You should have received a copy of proposed revisions to School Board Policy G-3.2.4. And what this has to do with is a revision necessary or at least desirable as a result of a change made by the Virginia retirement system applicable to presidents or officials of local education agencies, local education organizations, I should say. Historically, in many school divisions, including Arlington, the president of the local education association has been an employee of the school division, and when serving in that role, continued as an employee with the salary and benefits reimbursed by to the division by the education association, and then after some period of time, 2 years typically, the employee would return to employment in the school division. Importantly, while serving in that capacity, the employee, historically anyway, has been able to accrue earned service credit towards retirement under the Virginia retirement system. Arlington Public Schools and other school divisions where this was the case were informed by the Virginia retirement system in late June of this year that effective July 1, employees would no longer be able to do that. That is, would no longer be able to accrue retirement service credit and essentially stay on the roles of the employer in a covered position. And that in order to be able to have the opportunity to purchase service credit, VRS service credit, they would need to be carried in some sort of leave status. As I mentioned, up to now in Arlington and Fairfax and Prince William, Loudoun, a number of other districts, the president of the Education Association had been carried in an active employment status. As it stands, Arlington Public Schools leave policy G 3.2.4 doesn't have a leave category for that situation. There are some other school divisions, Fairfax being one, Virginia Beach being another, have amended their leave without pay policies essentially in order to allow an employee serving as president or official of an education association to serve, to be in a leave status. So the purpose of the current amendment that you have to the policy is to allow someone to do that, that is, be in a leave without pay status, but then to return to an available position in the Arlington Public Schools after the employee's term of office is concluded. The language that you have essentially adds another subsection C, to the long-term leave of absence policy language. The particular formulation that you have here provides for a 2-year unpaid leave of absence with the opportunity for 2 additional years, a renewal of 2 additional years from a maximum of 4 years. The effect of this should be that the employee, and obviously the employee is subject to whatever the Virginia retirement system regulations are at the time, but will have the opportunity, either the employee or the local education association will have the opportunity to purchase those additional years of service credit during the time the person is serving. This doesn't provide that Arlington Public Schools will do that, and it further provides that, as with other leave without pay categories, the benefits of the employee will have to be paid to Arlington Public Schools. That's really the purpose and effect of the policy change here. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cafferty. And I just want to share with the community before I ask for speakers that the amendment is posted on board docs, and we were not able to prepare a presentation in time, so we apologize for that. But this is something that we just received notice over the summer from VRS, and trying to understand the complications and the legalities of the change. We were working hard to bring it forward for information as soon as we could. And in that time, we were not able to prepare a formal presentation. So we apologize for that, but the amendment, again, is posted on board docs. There's a red line version, a clean version, and we will move to speakers and then take questions from the board. And we would then expect to act on it on September 5th, assuming that no major changes needed to be made or information provided in between that would cause it to have to be, delayed any further. So do we have speakers on this item?
Yes, we have one speaker, Ms. Ingrid Gant.
Good evening to Chair Talento. It's wonderful to see you in that chair. To members of the school board, to Dr. Murphy, it's been a great run. Look forward to seeing you do big and better things in West Virginia. And to the deputy clerk, to all members of the executive leadership team and all assembled. My name is Ingrid Gant. I am the president of the Arlington Education Association. And I stand with a former president and a board member here tonight many members are watching, to say that I applaud you for listening. I applaud you for taking a stand and putting something in place that will ensure that the Arlington Education Association, our union, which is made up of over almost 1,900 members of Arlington's school system employees, will have an opportunity to continue the collaborative effort that we have. Most of the things that the illegal had already spoken about is in effect right now. For those who don't know, Arlington continues to allow us to pay you the salary of the president. We've been doing that, and we continue to do that. Regardless of how you want it to be done, we can make sure we're at the table with that. But this is real. We understand that something has come from VRS. We only ask that whatever it is, we get an opportunity to see it. And we do thank you for allowing us to be at the table to discuss what it may look like. For those at home, this is a serious matter for us. I applaud you once again for allowing me to speak and to act on this very soon. My retirement is at stake, and I'm okay with losing a year and being able to return to a VRS system and get that back, because that's already been in VRS language. I contend that this is still union busting, and we continue to run the race and to continue to fight for our members. So thank you for that. I urge you to vote on September, the first meeting in September, yes to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gann, for your comments. Board members, do we have any questions or comments on this presentation?
I have a question.
Okay. Ms. Van Doren?
Mr. Cafferty, good evening.
Evening.
What I heard stated, and I also have we seen what has come from VRS? I'd like to see what has come from VRS.
Mr. Cafferty sent it to us in an email
sorry,
when we were trying to determine and understand the process, because it is complicated, but we did see that.
And it's an email form, and Arlington got the same email that I know Chesterfield did, and the other, so it didn't come in the form of, for whatever reason, in the form of a formal memo. It came in an email. It did come as a follow-up to, I think there were some indications from VRS that this was in the offing, but the official sort of written formulation of that is in an email, which you have, and certainly
Well,
can be
I
provided.
presume since it came to the school system, it's a public document, is it not?
It is.
Well, I just hope that it's shared. If it hasn't been shared, it should be shared. Okay,
that can
that's my
certainly happen.
point. Maybe it needs to be up on board docs with everything else. Okay, so here's my question.
Okay.
If in that letter, it says that as of July 1st, this goes into effect, I just would like to make sure we frequently approve appointments and make changes that are retroactive. So we can make this retroactive to the point where we were told that we must do this, right?
That's correct.
Even though we'll take the vote in September.
That's correct. That's correct. There
It's
won't
fine
be
to
the
do that.
operational problem with that.
And we won't have difficulty with the state that we did it on September 5th when we should have done it before July 1st.
No, because it's what we're doing is really, or what you all are doing is really creating a leave category for people in that situation. Just to be clear, we don't, VRS will, VRS has their own regulations, but this will provide the employee a way to be in an approved leave status during the additional year or 2 years, whatever it is. And nothing turns on approving this at your next meeting rather than tonight.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to make a comment to my colleagues. I don't know enough about this, but I want to make a couple of comments. One is, I think we should learn more about it, and I don't know who oversees VRS and who makes appointments to the governing body, but it seems to me this is something we might need to be talking to our legislators about. And then secondly, to me, serving in a leadership position in an association is a management opportunity. I can't think of a better spot than the places I've seen the presidents of AEA in terms of understanding the scope of issues, confronting employees, confronting our management, having to be in the middle of that and managing 1,900 employees. So to me, this is a perfect development opportunity, management development opportunity. I'm sure you are not the same person going into that job as you are going out of that job. And I've even heard some leaders in APS say that we wish some of the AEA leadership would become administrators in APS. So I would hope we might be able to be creative at some point and even put some credit to that work, because I do think it's management development. So I think that's a creative way to solve a problem, and I would love to see us do something like that and engage the state. I don't know how, I don't know who oversees those appointments, but it seems to me we should be getting at it that way, as well as making the adjustment that allows us to support our employee association, which we're doing, and I'm really grateful to my colleagues for moving quickly on this. So, but I want to do those other things. I just don't know exactly what, but we should.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Kinnunen.
Kind of going to try to ask about the very thing Ms. Van Doren was mentioning, probably Dr. Murphy. So if we approve this policy on policy revision, amendment. It's a policy amendment. If we approve this on September 5th, does the one employee who is in that situation basically, is that employee made whole to the level that the employee was the previous year? In other words, is there something about the VRS change that actually changes the financial implications for the coming year, and what is that change?
Oh, sure. I mean, what has changed is that up to now, the employees in that situation were allowed to be regarded as in VRS-covered positions, so that either the school system or the employee could pay the employer-employee rate for VRS coverage, rather than what VRS has said is you can't do that anymore, and so the best you can do is buy the service credit later, which is going to be at an actuarial rate, which is at a much higher rate. So that's employees in that situation are not in the same position that they were, but there's really not anything the school board can do about that. The most the school board can do, I think, is what the school board is doing here, which is saying, we'll continue you in an approved leave category so that you can, either if you're able or your association is able, to buy you service credit when you're, when
after
your
you
tenure is
return.
done. Correct.
You're saying. So the difference is we weren't putting money toward the AEA president's retirement in the past. We're still not. The difference is that person, either AEA or that person, could have been contributing during their tenure while they were president. Now they have to take a complete leave and can contribute at a higher rate when they return.
I think that piece is right. I don't know. I guess I would ask Ms. Will-Smith whether APS for up to now was contributing the employer share of VRS. Okay. So, right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And just getting to Ms. Van Doren's point about finding out, who made that decision, and whether we could ultimately lobby later. I guess it wasn't costing them anything either way. It was costing us. Is that correct? Or are they somehow saving?
They are. So this is, we've seen, and we've worked with AEA, they've really tightened their belts at VRS. And so there's certain things that used to be able to be as a part of your compensation in VRS, like 0.17. So if you taught an extra period, that extra money that you got could be computed in with your salary to go to VRS. They no longer allow us to do that. So they are using cost-cutting means, whereas people, when they got temporary promotions or temporary assignments, that extra money could be as a part of your VRS compensation. They no longer allow that because at the end of the day, they compute your pension based upon your salary. And so when we were adding those 0.17's extra periods or the temporary promotions, that was inflating folks' salary and costing VRS more money when they were paying out pensions. So for them, it's a cost-saving mechanism when it comes to pensions.
So this all may be couched in a set of things they say they're doing for cost cutting, although my understanding is there are only 5 of these positions across the entire state, so it's not a big.
But they're
six.
doing these positions, and we've also worked with AEA because we've had people doing temporary promotions within the school divisions. So if you're an interim or if you're an acting and you get a salary bump, that does not go towards your VRS salary or the compensation that you will get as a result in your pension. So it's not just these positions are part of it, but there's also any type of temporary
So it's
promotion.
complicated.
Supplemental
Yeah.
retirement contributions are another piece of it. It's been part of a system of, as Ms. Wellsmith said, belt tightening or whatever you want to say on the part of VRS over about the last, I'd say, 3-4 years.
Okay, and it's again, something we can look into more. At the moment, this policy change allows for the AEA presidency to continue on leave, and then we can do some further research about the VRS piece.
Correct, as
I'd
to
like
whether
to
there's
do
any
that.
legislative angle on that or whatever, but that's right.
Ms. O'Grady?
I just want to say that I'm happy that we've been able to work to move this forward in an expedited manner so we can continue to support our staff that are members of AEA. And I think it's important for us to move forward with this. Thank you.
And I just want to add some clarity as how I understand it. And I think all of this has been said, but sometimes when I reiterate it, it ensures that I understand what I'm saying in the matter at hand. So my understanding is that prior to this VRS ruling, the person serving as AEA president was an APS employee serving under the association, and the AEA reimbursed APS for the full salary package. And so we were not paying for the person to serve as AEA president, but they were under our umbrella as an employee, and the AEA fully reimbursed salary and benefits. What VRS has said is you can no longer state that the person serving as the association president is an employee. Therefore, you must sever that relationship. And if that person chooses to serve as a president under that association, they will they cannot be an employee of APS. In which, then, this is what VR is saying is that, well, they quoted an IRS ruling as well. But so what the leave does is it says you're an employee and you're now on leave. We give teachers leave for education, leave for maybe a grant or research. And so this allows the person who's serving as AA president to be on a professional leave. And they're sever the ties of salary, but does not sever the relationship as an employee. So then the compensation package is the same. However, in this case, when AA reimburses us for the compensation, the VRS payment will not be part of that benefits because VRS will not allow that person to be qualified as an APS employee while they are serving during this leave. And that is the VRS challenge that we're up against. And so now a person serving under the AA presidency will lose those years of service as VRS, as retirement benefits. It's almost like they take a stay from their retirement benefits. And when then they come back as having resigned from that position because of their term being up, they then recommence their VRS benefits because they're now APS employees and have returned from leave. Is that correct?
Yes, you can the person, when they return, can still buy back years of service credit. It's much more expensive than it is
Right.
to make the employee contribution as you would if you were an employee in a covered position. I mean, what VRS is basically saying is when you're serving in that president role, you're not a covered position under VRS.
Okay, that is very helpful. And so then that goes to what my colleagues are saying about understanding where at the state we can lobby and explain that we should be supporting our education associations, and that this cost-saving measure is, from what I'm hearing from some of my colleagues, damaging to the relationship between the education association and the school system. So thank you, Mr. Kaverke. Sure. Mr. Golson, you stepped away. Did you have any questions or comments? Okay. Okay, so then we will bring this forward for action on September 5th, and then we will move on to the next information item. Thank you again.
Good, thank you.
The next information item is the revision of School Board Policy J-8.3.1, School Health Services. Dr. Murphy.
Yes, we're going back to Ms. Putnam for this, and I think there are some small updates here with this particular policy.
This one is just an addition of some key language that comes from the Virginia Code. So it's language to help provide guidance related to the administration of glucagon, as well as other medications, and it's noted in Virginia Code. So this language just needs to be added to the policy for the start of the 2019-20 school year. That's the only piece that we added.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers? Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you for the presentation and for amending this policy. And this policy actually did go through a full revision. And this, we were able then also after the full revision to insert this code piece.
Correct.
But I understand there was new code
Right.
passed this year, so this will come back for an amendment later in the fall once we're ready to add
Correct.
the language that aligns with the new Virginia code.
Right, they added additional language that's not part of what you have seen, so this will be in place. We need this just for the start of the school year, and then
Excellent.
we can do the amendment in September, October.
Okay, thank you. And acting on this item in September 5th is?
Got it.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Ms.
My
Putnam.
pleasure.
Okay. Our next agenda item tonight is a temporary easement at Gunston Middle School. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, Mr. Chadwick has this final item, so I'll turn to him.
Thank you. This concerns a deed of easement at Gunston Middle School, and it's actually a temporary easement for construction. So Arlington County is going to change the intersection of the road closest to the school with Arlington Ridge Road. It's going to do a T intersection. I have a plan coming up. And in order to do it, they're not actually going to be constructing on our property, but they need access to our property in order to perform the construction. An easement is needed for that. The easement has been approved by legal counsel. This shows the area which is unintelligible to you, but on this map you can see how that intersection is being turned into a T intersection, which we thoroughly applaud because it actually makes it safer crossing for our students and staff and families going to the school. So I believe the work will be done at some point in the fall, and we will get a new intersection out of it. Thank you.
Excellent.
And I'm sorry, the recommendations, we authorize the school board chair to sign the deed of temporary easement at Gunston Middle School to perform this work.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Do we have any speakers? Colleagues, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, hearing no comments or questions, I thank you, Mr. Chadwick, and this will come back for action under our consent agenda item on September 5th. And thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
We are now at new business. Board members, do you have any new business? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.